Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm grateful for those that could join us here. This is being recorded, so it'll be for our friends who couldn't be here in different time zones or work or travel, just kept them from participating. But I'm really grateful to have Nathan Caldwell joining us today from Camp Duffel. Nathan and I met at the Latin America International Conference this past year, where they had some 12, 13 Latin American countries gathering. I think that one only happens every 4 or 6 years or something like that. So it was a real pleasure to meet Nathan, and over a few meals we got to catch up about the ministry he was involved in. And I was just really moved by what he's doing. And I know there's different versions of this kind of camping going on throughout the world, and I want to highlight it because when we hear, and I'm at the South Africa National Convention, and it's full of young people, and you catch the life and vibrancy and faith and excitement and anything's possible, and they all want to open a camp or direct a camp, and that's their dream. And I think for many of us who've been in Christian camping for a lot of years, the first thing we think of is, oh, well, you gotta find some property, you're going to have to generate some funds, you're going to have to work with the local authorities, you're going to have to get engineering and architectural and permits, and then by the time you get started 3 years later, then you can start thinking about assembling a team and training. And meanwhile, you're not doing the very thing that you are called to do. And so traditional camp, bricks and mortar camps are fantastic. We all know that, and they're super effective. But there's other ways too to do what we would call Christian camping. And if you remember Dan Boland's 5 pillars of Christian camping, were a change of location, an extended time outside of life's routine, immersion into creation, relational bonding, spiritual intents. And where and how we do that in temporary community looks and takes different and takes on a lot of different shapes. So we've invited Nathan, who runs a program. You can tell by the title, Camp Duffel, that might be leading into that. I'm not going to steal his thunder, let him explain everything to you. But I'll just tell you this one story. When I was in India with our good friend Raj, and we were going to have a day of tours. And I said, Raj, is today when you're going to show me your camp? And he just laughed and he tapped on the back of his pickup truck and said, this is camp. It all fits in here. And I got a good lesson coming from 30 years inside of a big institution camp, and all these methods and ways of going about Christian camping, they all work. But let's take time today to learn about a more portable version of that, and that could be valuable to our associations, to our camps, and to our upcoming emerging leaders who just feel led to start something in their area. So Nathan, thank you for being with us, and I'm going to turn
Yeah,
this over
I'm
to you.
excited. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks so much, Bill. Really appreciate it. Shout out to my dad. He surprised me. I had no idea he was going to be here. So my dad is here, which is kind of cool because he's one of my heroes. And the quick story of how Camp Duffel got its name actually arrived from him. I was doing Camp Duffel and I didn't have a name for it, and I didn't really intend on having a name for it. It was just kind of one of those things that grew naturally about 12 years ago. And I was traveling in Mexico helping people do camps. And my dad was like, "Are you going to do this next year?" And I was like, "I don't know, probably." And he said, "You should name it." Um, and I was like, "No, I don't think so. Like, this is just like something I'm doing. It doesn't need its name. It doesn't need a website. It doesn't need to be anything more than just something that Nate Caldwell's doing." And 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I'm back in the US and my dad sends me a little logo. It looked like this. And he said, "You should call it Camp Duffel." And the name stuck, and we haven't changed the logo or the title since. I think I spent all of 2 seconds deliberating on it, and I was like, "That's perfect." So I think a lot of other organizations spend a lot more time trying to figure out what they're called, but for us, it was easy. And that's shout out to my dad for that one. So um, I'm super excited to be here. Yeah, like Bill said, my name is Nate Caldwell. I currently live in the U.S., but my experience has been growing up in Mexico as a missionary kid, again to my parents, and working in camp ministry throughout Latin America. Um, and then came back to the States for college, did 5 years at a camp called Deerfoot Lodge, and then started Camp Duffel. And through encouragement from Chief Ron Mackey, who's the director of Deerfoot Lodge, and other people, launched, and also my dad, right, launched Camp Duffel, and been doing that now for since 2011. So I can not do the math, apparently 14 years. So it's been a ride. It's been a real pleasure to be able to do that. And one of the questions that I have been asking people for a long time, especially at CCI conferences and places where people are already committed to the idea of camping, because I'm uber committed to the idea of camping, and I don't think I need to persuade anybody on this Zoom call that camping is an incredible tool for to be used for Christ and to furthering His kingdom. So, but every tool has its problems and its limitations. And so I asked the question, what are some of the problems? And I specifically say, what are the problems that you're experiencing in your camp ministry, in your area? And so I would actually like to pose that question. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, maybe just a couple minutes. And so try to keep, but I would like to almost hear from everybody if possible. And just what are the barriers of entry, or the things that are inhibiting your ministry from taking the next step? And I won't feed you any more information than that and put answers into your mouths already. I'd love to hear. And this is the first chance I've ever had to do it for such a worldwide audience. And so I'm a little excited to hear what the perspectives are that are outside of camps in Latin America. So
I think the opportunity is where you maybe got multiple inquiries at the same time. I mean, obviously, UK it's very seasonal, so you get a lot of demand at peak season
in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. So, the potential of actually running something elsewhere, if you had the volunteers or the staff offsite, something different, or perhaps something a little bit more focused on leaders or a certain age group or a certain group of kids, just like 10, whereas your camp might take, a couple of hundred, and you just want to invest in a small group.
Thanks, Norman.
Let me just jump in there. So my setting, briefly, those who don't know, I'm involved with a UK setup where we provide conference facilities for Christians, for churches across the UK. And we happen to have our quarterly board meeting with trustees. That's our kind of governing model in the next couple of days. And one of the things we're looking at, we've got an external facilitator coming in, is mission drift. So it only takes a couple of degrees out on your direction, and over a few years, you could find actually you've lost your way a bit. So I won't get into whether we think we have or we haven't, but the best way to avoid mission drift is to think you might mission drift. So we're doing some work on mission drift, which is just helpful for us. Where did we start 115 years ago? Where are we now? Yeah, there might be Wi-Fi and falafel and electric car charging points, but actually, fundamentally, the gospel hasn't changed. So are we still focused on that and trying to avoid mission drift?
I would add, where I'm based in California, we have 3 campsites and we can't expand. There's property, but there's not permission. It's locked up and a lot of protection now. So it's very limiting.
For us, it would be more over like accommodating everyone. So everyone want to come to the camp, but we don't have like enough spaces, I would say, like whenever we go to some other places. So that is always a struggle. Yep.
Yeah, for India, probably it would be, we are a very small percentage in our country, minority, 3%. So we cater to our own churches, but with regard to the larger other community members, there is a barrier when we use Christian camping, or when we add that because of the negativity right now in our nation.
That's one I haven't heard before. In Latin America, it's very Catholic, so being Christian is kind of cultural, unlike in India.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it also relates to Nepal also, like in some cases, like some of the youths or some of the Sunday school kids or some of the teachers, they are single in their family, single believers. So their whole family is like non-believers, and then only one person is, accepted Christ, and they are wanted to come. Sometimes, yeah, that also becomes like a barrier, like Francis was sharing, because of the, like in like majority is Hinduism, and then Buddhist, and then Christians are small in numbers, and they have all the negative things. So yeah, I agree with that too.
Well, in our area in Russia and Belarus, there are some challenges with the state, that it's complicated to have Christian camps. And also there is a decreased amount of campground facilities that are owned by Christians. So there are not that many places where you can go and have a camp without, like, there are some places that wouldn't let you have a Christian camp there. And unfortunately, we had some really great campgrounds that are no longer available.
One more.
Well, I will just share one from Raf, who's from Ghana. He's just posted in the chat that theirs is to do with cost. That's a big barrier.
Okay. Yeah, costs. So in my experience, the answers, the number one inhibitor of camp is resources. And so that is specifically financial resources, but some other big ones are facilities. And we had a couple of people here say that as well, right? A lack of facilities. Another one that was mentioned here, which is another big one, is leaders, a lack of leadership. And then one that in Latin America is said a lot is a lack of church ownership or support. And so there's this disconnect between the camp ministry and the churches. And so they aren't gelling for one reason or another. And so there's, the church wants to do its thing, but the camp wants to do its thing. And so then there's this tension between those two dynamics, and the church is, the church is to be using the camp, but the camp wants to support the church. But then there's this conflict of interest as well in direction or mission, and where we're spending resources. And so there's potentially a lack of ownership on the churches. And we see this even in the United States, where we have like a campground that's owned by a denomination, but it's poorly resourced because it's no one church's problem as well. And so those I think have been some of the largest problems that I've seen in pulling this question from a large number of different people, again, specifically Latin America. But I'm really intrigued and would like to keep talking to some of you guys, specifically India and Russia, where there's definitely more going on. And it's definitely a different environment. And I'm very new to those things, and would be very hesitant to say, hey, I think this will work for you, right? Like, I don't know your context. I don't know your specific limitations and the things that are those barriers. But Camp Duffel is essentially my answer to some of the problems that I see with camp. And not because I think camp isn't valuable. I think it's the best tool ever. And that's why I wanted to make it even better and more available to people. If you look at just the population of kids in a specific area, it's, pick your metropolitan city and you've got 1 million, 2 million kids camp age. And that means that one facility is just going to be vastly incapable of supporting the needs of that city. And so how do you, and I think, John, you mentioned, or maybe it was Norman, that you have a very small window of vacation time for a very large demand of people. And so you have, you have all of this time in which no camps can happen because of school, because of the programs that are already in place. And then you have, 3 weeks of vacation, 6 weeks of vacation, whatever it is. And so then your facilities are being used in like a spike amount of time, but then desperately little in other pieces of times. But everybody wants, in like Latin America, it's Semana Santa, right? Where we have these 2 weeks of Holy Week and everybody wants their camp during that time period. But then you have all the rest of this time where it's like, well, this is school. And so it's difficult for facilities to deal with those ups and downs of the school calendar, right? So, and then financially, like we've got issues financially, right? Properties don't just cost money when you buy them, they cost money to upkeep. I'm in real estate, that's my profession currently, so I'm a big fan of land, obviously, but it is an incredibly costly endeavor. And if it's not returning, like if I were to buy a rental property and then only inhabit it in short amount of time, it would probably not end up being a good investment. And so that's one of the issues that you see with camp facilities, is that they sit dormant so many. They would do great if you could have like full capacity year round, but they don't. And so you're again struggling with this like high demand in low periods of time and no demand in other periods of time, right? And they cost to upkeep, the keep the lights on, electricity, water, maintenance, buildings falling down, safety precautions, and that's not even, then you have like procuring more land or growing, and Bill mentioned, inhibiting factors on zoning or like what the city allows for further development, and you have a lot of issues there. Leaders, where are we going to get Christ-centered leaders that are willing to either volunteer, which is an ideal situation, or if we pay them, where are we getting the money to pay them, right? And so we, in the US, the system has been to take leaders and cycle them week after week after week after week after week, and use them, because then you have less you can train them once and then recycle them for 12 weeks over the summer, and they get 100 kids at the end of the summer. And how is that leader then discipling or engaging with those kids after summer is over? Probably not, right? So you have this incredibly temporal time in which that relationship is built, and then it's non-existent afterward, right? And so how does camp do follow-up? How do we do long-term like engagement and discipleship, right? Like we see Jesus's discipleship method is over 4 years. It's not 4 days. And so how do we engage with a methodology of discipleship that Jesus brings into camping? And we say, oh, we're discipleship oriented and we're focused on that. But then because we have a lack of leaders, we just have to push more kids through these leaders again and again and again and again. And then, or they're full-time at the camp and they just go through group after group after group after group, and they teach, the rappelling classes 18 million times, and then they get burned out, right? I was talking to some friends of mine in Bolivia, and that was their situation. It's just like, I'm working in this facility that is a camp facility. We take these groups every single weekend, and I'm just burnt out doing the same thing again and again and again. And that's not discipleship either, right? So how do we address these problems as the community of Christian camping? And so so some of my thoughts on this, and I'll rewind a little bit and talk more specifically about Camp Duffel and how I think that we are, and we're not perfect. I definitely don't have all the answers to all of those questions I just proposed. But in thinking about these questions, I do think that I have come to some solutions, and mostly just stolen them from other people and collected them. And I have a big pile of them now from collecting them from people who are wiser and smarter than myself over the years. And so finances. I think that the stat is that 50 to 60% of the budget is dedicated to the facility. So if we could eliminate the facility cost, we would be cutting our budget more than in half. So how though can we get rid of a facility? But I love Bill and Dan Boland's 5 points of Christian camping, because I do think that we fit into those, and facility isn't actually on that list. And so I love his insight on that, and recognizing, hey, like, facility actually isn't an essential or a key piece of what Christian camping is. And so what we did with Camp Duffel, and it kind of happened, I wanted, like, Bill, like you were talking about these young people. When I was young, I wanted a camp facility. I wanted to be the director of a camp. I wanted a mountain with lots of trees and a river flowing through it and a lake on it. And I wanted to be able to have kids come to it and enjoy it. And I have had to let that dream die. Mostly because I'm just not willing to raise the money for it, like $4 million or something like that. And over the years, I have actually become more excited about reaching more kids, as opposed to dumping $4 million into a beautiful mountain. And so how does Camp Duffel deal with the issue of not having a facility? Well, our tagline is, we're not a place, we're a strategy. And so we have, what Camp Duffel does is we partner with local churches, and we ultimately are not actually technically a camp. We say we want to help you as a local church with your camp. And so we come alongside that local church and we support them in 3 specific areas. The first is a program. So we write a program every year. These are all the different books that we've now published. So we have like year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. They've got themes, they've got all the games, they've got all of everything that's needed for you to run a camp in any location. So a lot of times when somebody is developing a camp program, they're like, oh, well, we have the pool, so we're going to do a pool game. Or we have the high ropes course, so we're going to do a high ropes course thing. Or we have this climbing wall. Or we have, you know, this weird building that's shaped like this, so we're going to create some game that is functional for this weird shaped building. Or even just a scavenger hunt, or, you know, like going through the mud hole, or whatever it is, right? Like, those are all activities that are oriented around some specific facility. And so what we've done with Camp Duffel is we've removed the need for any specific facility. We've made sure that even our games don't really need trees, because some facilities don't have trees. You basically need a hot parking lot to run a Camp Duffel program. And so that enables us to use the program anywhere without much changes. And so we've designed the program in mind for it being used anywhere. And when I say anywhere, I do mean anywhere. Probably 50%. So Camp Duffel is now in 4 different countries. We're in Bolivia, we're in Costa Rica, we're in Mexico, and we're in Colombia. We'll hit about 1,500 kids this summer in about 30 to 35 different locations. And so our average camp runs between 50 and 100 kids. And our program is designed for that, because that's what the average size church can draw, as far as like tapping into their local community, pulling their resources, and advertising for camp. We've just seen that that's what a small to medium sized church can pull as far as the number of kids. And so that's what we've designed our program around. But churches and we don't have money to rent a facility or to own a facility. And so where are we going to do the camp? Well, we have several different solutions for the church. One, we can do it in the church itself. Most churches have a facility of some sort. And so finding ways to utilize that church and maybe recognize or find out that they have like a park within walking distance from that church that we can utilize for, you know, more field type games. Second opportunity is schools themselves. So schools are usually vacant when camps are taking place. And so using school facilities for the purpose of camp can be a good resource for the school. They appreciate their facility being used, and a good resource for the camp, because that school is vacant during that time period. We've also used parks, or in Latin American, they have these things called fincas, which are kind of just like privately owned pieces of land out in the middle of nowhere with like 4 cows on it. And they are maybe owned by somebody in the church or something like that. And so we utilize those a lot in Latin America as well. Think of it as like a small ranch, but ranch feels a little bit too wealthy to describe a finca. So definitely low resourced. We just had a camp in Colombia, and I wasn't present for it, but I heard some of my staff talking about it, and they were laughing because they were like, we had 120 kids and 1 bathroom. So like, how do you manage that kind of logistics, right? And so you manage, you do it, like the alternative is these kids don't get to go to camp. And so like a line outside of the bathroom, and or maybe even like a scheduled time when instead of an activity block, that cabin's block is showering. Now, maybe it's not the best time of the day to shower, but hey, you get a chance to shower. And so problem solving and being creative and thinking differently about how we can organize a schedule around the lack of facilities, as opposed to saying we need the facilities, is a key proponent of what Camp Duffel does. So that's facilities. Second one, leaders. How Camp Duffel has addressed the issue of leadership is we have, we're kind of like a co-op, in the sense that what we have done is we've partnered with local churches, and we ask those local churches to send us 2 or 3 volunteers from those local churches that are willing to commit to the entire summer, or the season of which that country is in vacation, right? And so they are basically providing a couple resources, 2 or 3 people, and then all of those churches, those 5 or 6 churches, get to share those 2 leaders, 3 leaders. And so then each church gets enough qualified, young, excited, capable leaders at their facility during that time. So we are recycling our leaders, right? So we do recycle leaders some. And so we have probably our average leader attends 4, maybe 5 camps over the course of their summer. So they have 4 days of training, and then they have 4 days for each camp, 3 or 4 days. We have programs for 3-day camps, and we have programs for 4-day camps. Our curriculum can go in either direction depending on what the church desires. So those, we call those Duffel counselors, and they after they graduate, they get a blue band that has a reflective tape in it. It is to remind them that they're a reflection of Christ. And so, but they form a really tight-knit community of 12, and they get to travel within their country. So these aren't like transplants from a different country or anything like that. These are literally 2 or 3 volunteers from each of the 5 churches, 4 or 5 churches that they are going to assist and attend. And that relationship, so we have 2 or 3 people that are both long-term members of the church recommended by their pastor, and they are Duffel staff. And so that is a relational bridge that is more than just we as a camp are serving you as a church. That is a relational bridge, because those individuals identify as both Duffelers, Camp Duffel counselors, and church members. And so they have a bridge in which they can give the benefit of the doubt in situations of conflict or other situations to both sides, right? And so that we've seen that has been really helpful in engaging with the church. And again, Camp Duffel is technically not a camp. We are here to support and help you with your camp. And so we're very clear that we defer on non-essential theology to the pastor. So we are interdenominational, and we work with multiple denominations. And so we defer to the theology of the pastor. And so now 2 or 3 of those counselors are in that denomination, so they would probably support that specific theology that might be in question. But then they're good friends because they've been traveling and training with the other 8 or 9 people in that group. And so there's a bridge theologically as well. And there's opportunities to share resources. So or share ideologies. The counselors get to experience not just how one church does camp, but also how another church does camp, and another church does camp, and another church does camp. And so therefore, all of those counselors get to experience multiple solutions to the problems that every camp runs into, or every church runs into when doing camp. And I should probably state, just because we have a very large range of people from multiple countries, this is a system that has been adapted for the way Latin America does camps. And most of the way Latin America does camps is the church organizes a camp, and then the church does the camp, and they rent a facility from a camp that is, or a facility that is owned by a Christian. They rent that space and then they come back. And so oftentimes you see facilities not providing programming, and the programming is often provided by the church, which is written by 20 to 25-year-olds who were put in charge and are volunteers by a local pastor. And so that is the system in which Camp Duffel was designed and developed around. So some of these things might not function for how the system is in your countries. I just want to acknowledge that right here. But if that's a little confusing, definitely please feel to stop and ask questions. Yeah, any questions thus far before we dive into the third point?
Can I just ask a question, Nate, about,
Yes.
you come across as very creative, very pragmatic, you've got a great can-do attitude, and clearly that comes from your dad. Where in your, I'm using the word recruitment here because you'll have limited control over that if the churches are putting forward people who are both church members and dufflers. How are you choosing people with attitude that you can work with? Because if your environment, if you've got people who are struggling, you're just going to be working with a bunch of moaners. You need some great people with great attitude. Forgive me if I put that rather elegantly.
Yeah, John, that's a great question. I love that. So we have honestly, I think a fairly basic system for recruitment. We have several requirements. They agree to a very basic statement of faith. They go through one interview process. They fill out an application that's online, and they need two cartas de referencia, I'm skipping the word in English. References. They need two cards of letters of recommendation, one from their pastor and one from another individual. It could be anybody. And then they have a 30 to 45-minute phone conversation with one of our full-time staff. That is the entire process that we go through about choosing our Duffel counselors, which are volunteering. We do not pay them. They volunteer for, it depends on the country a little bit. In Mexico, the volunteer time frame is about 5 weeks. In Colombia, the volunteer time frame is like 2 weeks in January and 2 weeks in July. In Bolivia, it's 3 weeks in January. So, I mean, it varies, right? But it's, I would say about a month is what we're looking for from people as far as volunteer time. And though going to your question directly, I think that most people, I should say most, not everybody, although I want to say everybody. I think that almost everybody who is a Christian, a committed Christian, can be a camp counselor. And I think that the issue is about finding their comfort zone and the things that they are good at and encouraging them, instead of saying, oh, you're not capable, and then not doing it. I find, and this was when I was a youth pastor, we set high bars. And so we set high expectations and we expect you to meet these expectations. And I see that humanity rises to the occasion. And when you have more committed leaders, so we have in our teams of 12, so we have 10 counselors, 5 guys, 5 girls, and then 2 leaders, a director and an assistant director. And those director and assistant director are multi-year Dufflers. So they've been around now for 3, maybe even 4, 5, 6 years. So they are chosen with a lot more delicacy, right? And like they've proven themselves over a long period of time. And so their job is to help those counselors that are weak in an area. But even if the counselor is a 5 out of 10, I think that one, we put them with younger kids in the array of possible things. You know, I think that putting them with younger kids is more helpful. Younger kids are going to be less likely to notice the quirkiness of that individual or the social ineptitudes of that individual. And we often see them thrive. I think that empowering people is essential, and that we're all told to be disciples. I mean, like, God didn't say, hey, only the most talented people should be disciplers. Like God gives this command to all of us. And so who are we going to disciple? Well, kids is a really easy first thing to disciple, and we all have to have a first step somewhere. So I think that being a counselor is like the first step. And so why would I deny somebody the first step of their journey toward in Christian leadership? And so maybe they aren't going to take another step. Maybe they're never going to be a director. That's okay. Like, they have other strengths. And so I think that empowering them gives them that smile, and making them feel valued is how we get good leaders. We also ask the church to provide one leader for every 10 kids that are coming to camp, that are only going to be a part of that camp and no other camp. So these are not Dufflers. They are just church volunteers for the church camp. And we partner a Duffler with a church leader. And the church leader knows the kids, most likely, at least some of them, has some semblance of relationship. At the very least, they have seen them at church over the last 6 months or year or 2 years or however long they've both been coming. And so there's some relational dynamic that is built there as well. And so we take these two, and they're in charge of the 10 kids that we call that a cabin, right? A team. I don't know the language that you guys might be using, but that's our cabin group, our team group. And all of our activities are built around those 12. And so we don't do a lot of big group games. We don't do a lot of big preaching times. We do a lot of small group oriented activities so that we can really encourage that church leader to build relationships with those 10 kids, so that is ongoing discipleship all year round. And our Camp Duffel counselor is facilitating and enabling. They know the games, they know the Bible studies, but we also have the book, and we give another book to the local leader so that they can turn to page 47. This is our Bible study, and you can just kind of read and go along with it. You don't have to know how to engage with that too. So it's also about providing sufficient resources to enable them to succeed, right? Because we don't want to be bad leaders and give insufficient resources and push people outside from comfort zone to panic zone, and then they are incapable, and then this is a bad experience for them, and they don't feel like they succeeded as a counselor, and then they're like, well, I can't be a counselor, like, I'm not going to pursue ministry any further. So we definitely want to equip and empower people to feel successful in their camp experience as a leader.
Thank you so much for that. That's a great model. I think it sounds like it's a 21st century version of Paul and Silas.
That's a huge compliment. Thank you, John.
Nathan, a couple of questions that have come up. Is Camp Duffel just day use, or are there some overnight options? And if so, where do you stay?
Yeah, no, we are an overnight camp. We are not day use. We are not VBS. We are a camp, and I am committed to that. I think that the overnight experience is an essential piece of the camp experience. You have rest like eating and rest are parts of the rhythm of life that God gave us as we go through this, this daily routine. And so breaking that up is a part of it. It enables the camp experience to be continuous as opposed to like choppy, right? And so I do think that having that overnight experience is essential. Sleeping is inherently vulnerable. Like, just the act of like falling asleep in a different location shows that you have some semblance of safety and are like giving up control, right? Like it's, you have to, if you intend on falling asleep, which kids don't really like to sleep at camp, but I think that's for other reasons, right? So, so yeah, we are overnight. And so the way that we do that, in schools, it's actually fairly easy. Classroom, 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 classroom. That's your cabin, that's your cabin, that's your cabin, that's your cabin. Boom, easy. Larger or churches with a little bit larger facilities, also fairly easy. Sunday school room, Sunday school room, Sunday school room, Sunday school room. Split up the kids that way. And then maybe like 2 guys groups in the sanctuary. Also, another thing that we often do, we do tents sometimes too. The way that we do tents is that we have everybody bring tents, but we specifically say and we advertise that the tent that you will bring is not the tent that you will be sleeping in. So all the tents are brought and then they are distributed according to cabin need. So this cabin has 8 girls and 2 leaders because they're like a slightly older age group or whatever. So then they're going to receive the appropriate number of tents spaces to fit that cabin group. You're going to go set up over on this side of the, soccer field. This group is going to get this, because if you allow the kids to sleep in the tent that they bring, then you're going to have siblings sleeping together, mixed genders. Your counselor is unable to control that environment. And so we tried it. It doesn't work. It's very, very difficult. So having that clear expectation when they come in is that the tent that you're bringing, you're donating it as a part of you're not donating it long term. You will receive it back, and we hope it be in the same condition that you gave it to us in. And we do try to like keep it kind of like at least one of the kids that brought it is sleeping in that tent and kind of stuff like that. But there's a little bit of logistics, but definitely focusing on and making sure that the cabin is sleeping together. And that's a key function of creating that group autonomy and developing their sense of identity as a group. So very important. If another thing that we do in especially like rural mountainous communities in Latin America, you have a church that's pretty centralized in the city. And then you have houses of the community around it. And so we ask the church ahead of time so like, let's say it's a group of 60 kids. We ask, hey, we need synchronization. And those are going to become the cabins for each of the groups. And so when the camp program during the day is over, we do have what's called Círculo de Amistad, Circle of Friendship, at the very evening, which is like your night devotion. So that is done back at the house or the school classroom or wherever it is. And so after that is done, then each group of kids would walk to the house that's been assigned to them, and that host would then receive them, and they would all sleep in the living room or in the extra bedroom that is in that house. And so that way we disperse those kids accordingly as well. Great question, Bill. Does that kind of answer it?
I was asking on behalf of others, so
Okay.
they'll have to weigh in on that. And then I imagine food is naturally the next question too.
Yeah, food's an essential part of the community for sure. And there's a large variety of food, right? And like how food is cooked. We do not have a recommendation of foods to be cooked, because different communities cook differently. And what I've found is that most churches have typically mothers who know how to cook larger amounts of food for people. I mean, most societies have some semblance of people who organize parties or weddings or things like that. And so they're capable of cooking large amounts of food. I would have no idea how to even start this, but I've seen camps of 300 kids being cooked over purely open fires. And they are laughing and joking, and the chickens are flying everywhere, and they're chopping off their heads. And that is very normal for that community. And so they don't bat an eye. And I didn't impose how I thought food should be made on them. And so we really delegate food to the local church and the local community. And we say, hey, like this is, it's your camp. and food is going to be your situation and your resources. So Camp Duffel, we're providing three things. We're providing the program, the written ideology of the program. We are providing the materials. So any soccer balls, any tarps, ropes, all the things that are needed for these activities, we fit in a 50-pound duffel bag. And that duffel bag goes with our group of 12. And so that's the second thing we're providing. And then the third thing that we're providing is that conglomerate of church counselors from all the different churches to attend your church's event. So that's the third thing that we're providing. The last thing I'd like to talk about, and then I'll open it up for questions, I know we're probably running out of time, is this idea of centralized versus decentralized. Some examples that we're seeing, like with the advancement of technology. So like we have the idea of the supermarket, right? Like Walmart, right? Or your local grocery store that was definitely centralized. So it, as a grocery store, can only reach the number of people that can commute to it and engage with it, right? And so what Amazon did was it decentralized shopping. It said, we have a new way to decentralize it. And so they have warehouses that none of us have ever gone to, and we order things off of Amazon, and it now comes to us. And so that's a decentralization of the ideology or the institution of grocery shopping, right? Another example from centralized to decentralized is cryptocurrency. So funds, money, banks, right? The brick and mortar locations, we have centralized funds from the institution of the government that are enacted upon and saying this is our currency as a government and as a society. So that's a centralized system. So moving to cryptocurrency, which is decentralized, which is non-government regulated, right? Or at least that's the idea behind it. And so we have society, and I think that when if you listen to any business podcast, they're going to talk about how like the businesses that are thriving are moving from centralized to decentralized, from the brick and mortar to the tech oriented, right? Like we had the tech boom already, but now we're moving to this second phase of it where like we're problem solving and not saying like, hey, like you come to us. How do we spread out and become like location oriented? And so I do think that there's something for us to learn from that business society or that business mindset as Christians and as the church, and asking ourselves these questions. And essentially that is the question, is like, how can we make camp into a decentralized model as opposed to a centralized model? And so, Camp Duffel, I think, has done this in a couple ways. We're not location specific. We are able to grow. We don't have stipulations on growth. We're growing really rapidly. I'm a little scared about it in some ways, right? Like maintaining some semblance of, like, for lack of a better word, like product control, right? And like maintaining this idea that like we want a camp with excellence that is genuinely discipling kids, that is teaching the genuine gospel and not like spread so far that, we lose some semblance of what that looks like. So it causes other problems, obviously, but we need to solve these problems. But decentralizing camp allows us to reach the world with camp and say, how can like, there's no boundary limit on that one. Traveling. So even if you have a localized location, you have to get kids there. And so there's a cost that might not be a cost from the camp itself, but it's definitely a cost. And so parents will be factoring in, hey, how am I going to get my kids there? So instead of moving large amounts of kids to a specific location, how can we move a small amount of people and camp to a large amount of kids? And then, yeah, so that's the last thing I'll say. And then, I think we do have a little bit of time for questions. But yeah, moving from that centralized ideology of camp ministry to a decentralized ideology of camp ministry.
Nathan, recently, this past year, I was at the Lausanne Congress in South Korea. There's 5,000 global leaders, 5,000 online, so 10,000 representing there. One of the major pushes in that was ministry collaboration. They went so far as to say that the age of the pioneering missions, that's past. And now is the age of ministry partnerships where the gospel is near almost every place on the planet. It's close. So now it's a matter of partnering with the indigenous people, the nationals, and the church there. And I've heard several times you mentioning things where you're with the church and you're like, if it's the theology, if it's your food or whatever it is, this is your community. We're here to help facilitate that. And I think you're right on the tip of the arrow of where world missions are going. So just a bit of encouragement to you from that.
Thanks, Bill.
Mm-hmm. Good moment now, the 5 minutes at the top of the hour for questions or comments for Nathan.
You mentioned you had a sort of a dream of a mountain and everything for a center. In fact, you've got a better situation without it, in that you can go to a mountain, you can go to a river, you can go to a lake.
Yes.
You've got all those facilities, and you're not focusing on just the one.
Correct. Yeah, God's plan was a lot better than my plan. Yeah.
Nathan, I have two questions. One is,
Yes.
one question and a comment. With regard to the question, there is a variety of facilities which you are using, churches, schools, and privately owned properties, etc. Did you face any challenge with regard to safety and compliances in your experience?
Yeah, we are working currently towards some safety release forms. So I have a friend who works in the tech industry, and he has gifted us an opportunity to be on a platform which will allow us to do online camper registrations locally for each church. So it'll look like each church has their own website, even though it's backed by us. It'll look like the church is just sending out that sign up form, and then we'll provide all of the forms for like release, and it's okay for us to take your kid's picture, and what are their meds and things like that through that. And right now, that I don't think that at least in Latin America, that's really not happening. In the camping world, we're not really seeing a whole lot of like hard registrations. Maybe some of the largest camps are doing that, but pretty much the majority, I would say, are not. And so this will allow us to put a really quality product in the hands of like the average Joe church, so to speak. And now that's not safety specifically, but that's at least a release for a parent signature on release of safety, that they're not going to sue the church, and then they're not going to sue the camp for their kid falling down on something. We don't do high risk stuff. We don't have, because of the nature, it's like anywhere, we don't have rappelling or high ropes course. We don't have almost ever swimming even, right? Like, because pools are expensive, and most likely the place that the church finds isn't going to have a pool. And those are some of the bigger like risks of within camping, right? And so, but have kids tripped and scraped their knee? Yeah, for sure. And so how we go about managing that, it's like, again, this is kind of up to the local church to mitigate. So you have, we had, this was a story that one of my directors in Colombia told me about, and so we were playing a night game, and one of the kids, against the rules, so like our rules stay on the ground, and he climbed up onto a roof, and the counselor found him and said, you need to get down from there. And on his way down, he cut himself pretty badly with a part of the roof. And now, one good thing about most of our camps is that we're usually within the city limits, or we're a little closer to like hospitals and stuff, right? Because we're using schools and churches at least 50% of the time. And so in those locations, right, like the hospital's as close as anything. And so he was able to go to the hospital, get stitched up. And now the director was super worried and talking to the parent in this situation. And his name is Ernest, the director of that camp. And Ernest was telling me the story, and he was like, I was really worried, and I get up there and I'm like apologetic, and I was like, yeah, and the mom was like, oh, he does this all the time. He's such a bad kid. And she was like, lift up your shirt, show him all the other scars you have. And the kid lifts up his shirt, and he's got like 6 scars on his back and belly from like all of the troubles that he's caused. And so like that turned out fine, right? But that's a potential situation in which the parent could have not been in that kind of situation, which is why we want those parent release forms, right? Even though it was stipulated in the rules, freaking don't climb up on the roof, right? Like there's some common sense there too. But this kid, you know, fun troublemaker, you know, classic boy, right? And does that. So we do want to make sure that the church is protected, which is why we're starting to embrace that stuff. But the reality is, like, most of the camps that we're working in are really like under-resourced is probably the best way to describe it. And so there's less, there's more the sense of like, dust it off, put some dirt on it, you're going to be fine, in these low level you know, scrapes and bumps and bruises that you might not receive in you know, the US, for example.
Thank you, Nathan. Just
Yep.
wanted to comment that the strategy with partnering and collaborating with the local church is the most powerful strategy.
Thank you. Yeah, we've seen a lot of success with it. And it is kind of one of those things where it's like, it's a little bit of human nature. Like we, and I don't think that I don't think that the church is wrong in this attitude, for the record. So I'll say that, right? Like, I don't think the church is wrong in this, but like they want a sense of control, and they want to make sure that, like, specifically the pastor, like, he's enabling and entrusting, like, if he's just sending everybody away or not even having any control or any say on theology or anything, like, maybe he's not even doing his job. So saying this is your camp, and this is, you know, ultimately we're here to help you with achieve your mission and goals and desires that you want for your church and for its youth programs, that we've seen incredible success with, instead of trying to say like, hey, we're really great, you should do us. It's rather like, how can we help you? And so, yeah.
Nathan, the things that you were discussing, we do exactly the same way, even our church, because most of the Christians over here, they don't have, you know, own property or like that. So they go to the different church, they stay over there. One of the good things that I find is like, we also build really very good relationship with the different churches, and even the youth, and even the, you know, like counselors who are over there. So that becomes like a very strong, like, bonding for us. So they remember every year, you know, like when we go to, you know, like some different places, we build up the relationship with the church, and they still, you know, like that relationship becomes really very, I would say, resourceful. So I was just recollecting everything that you were saying. So I was also like trying to know, like, what might be the different that you are doing than the things that we are doing. So I was trying to even get those, maybe some resources or some link or something, so that, because the things that you describe is, we do the same, exactly the same way, everything. So we go sometimes in the church, sometimes in the government schools, sometimes in a far place, and like sometimes the places is not well resourced, you know, like I always try to compare with the US. I don't say that as a camp. When we say camp over here, US is very, you know, like everything, you've got all the facilities, AC, door, and all the beds, but it's kind of different. And I was recalling everything. So I'm just trying to, very keen to know, like, what are the differences, things that you do it different than us. So I don't know, like maybe some, yeah.
I would be happy, John, to chat with you further and find out, and definitely, like Bill kind of mentioned, collaborate and share, which kind of is a great segue to me saying, like, these are free, and I'm happy to share. With a little bit of a caveat, I would say that this alone isn't sufficient. And one of the things that I've learned in spreading Camp Duffel, and I do desire for Camp Duffel to, as a as an ideology to spread. It doesn't even need to be the same name. Like, I would love to see any of you guys like utilize this, put your own name on it, and utilize it for your own countries in your own language. Obviously, we only have them in English and in Spanish, but they are in both of those languages. But it is, I do believe that it's all three. It's the leaders, it's the material, and it's the program itself. And I think part of training is camp. So I think that people learn how to do camp while doing camp. And so to have just the training, or to just email you guys the book, it deflates or it renders it quasi useless, I think. So while it's free, it comes with some strings attached to it that are non-financial. Let's say that. In that I want to make sure that the quality, for lack of a better word, the quality, or that like Camp Duffel is functioning as it should in discipling kids using the local church to achieve that mission. And that is my desire for it, and that was what it's written for. And so as long as that's being met, I think that it does need to be adapted for different cultures and countries and contexts. And so those, free to adapt and change, but with that caveat, because I think that is a Christian caveat, not a cultural caveat.
That's good. Thank you, Nate. Last night at a conference here in South Africa, I was sharing about different models of camping as, we approach a growing population that by 2035, 36, we might have about 6 billion people on the planet who won't know Jesus. So, we're going to be upwards of over 9, close to 10 billion people on the planet. And then statistically, about 6 billion would not be Christians. And of those, never even heard about Jesus. And so now camp, which is such an effective tool, when we talked about those 5 pillars of camp, to bring that to where they are. We should still have camp to say, come to us. That's always going to be an effective tool. But in order to reach the world, we've got to be creative. And we talked about urban adventure camps, like going into the cities, finding the resources that they have there, parks, rooftop gardens, you name it, utilizing all of that with these same 5 pillars to be creative with it, and teaming up with the local church is just the way it should be. We exist to support the church, the bride of Christ. And so I think this is really engaging. And hello, John Chetri. It's so good to see you. And what they're doing in Nepal is phenomenal. And this is why CCI is so powerful. Nate, you and John getting together, a third thing will pop up because of you guys collaborating. And that's the beauty of it. And then you have to promise us to share it with the rest of us, because we need that. And together we can really, really make a difference in this world, because the Holy Spirit is at work through this and just needs us to take a faithful step forward and try things in a different way. So it's just really, really encouraging. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. If there's any questions, I'm not going to stop you from asking those, but if it's quiet for a little bit here, I'm going to call it. So last chance. Going once.
Well, I just want to comment.
Please.
It is not a question per se, but I just want to congratulate our brother on a very good delivery. And I must say that thinking out of the box, trying to liaise with like minds and churches to partner with them, for me, I find it very innovative, and I think that is the way to go. And as Christendom, I believe it's a good thing, and we should all pick cues from that. I've made a few notes, and I believe that when we try to apply this to our various localities and situations, we'll go a long way to create great impacts. And I just like the point you just made again, that the gospel is not a come ye, but it's a go ye. So going into the localities to find innovative ways of doing what he's doing is just an excellent way of doing things. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wanna say hello to Nate.
Oh,
And
Sam, ¿cómo estás?
bien. I'm being part of Camp Duffel I was part of Camp Duffel for a couple of years, and I can say like it's a beautiful strategy, and you get to see leaders grow up so fast, and they go back to the church and they are serving in the church as leaders, more committed and with more tools to work with people. So it's beautiful what Camp Duffel is doing, and I've been watching this for years. And in CCI Mexico, we've seen the beauty and the fruits of doing this, and we enjoy that not only people who have like a place or a camp are part of the camp society or the CCI Mexico, but also people who are just willing to serve and to be like serving the church in different places, not just like one place or one camp. They are being part of the camp society, and they are sharing a lot of beautiful things to the community. So it's just a reminder that this is a beautiful tool, and then that camp or camps is not just about like going to a specific place, but like going to serve the church and the people, and you get to see all this beauty, not just in the camp but outside the camp, in the church and in other places. You get to experience the fruit of it. So
I didn't see you. It's so good to see you. I didn't know you were here. That's amazing. Sam, Sam helped at the very inception of Camp Duffel, and he and I traveled together for years. I have a picture of him, me, and one other guy sitting on the floor in a bus station when that was the entirety of Camp Duffel. It was just the three of us, and we were just young guys trying to do something. And yeah, so Sam is an amazing friend, and I'm so glad you're here, Sam.
Love it. That's great. Well, thank you all for joining us. Nate, thank you for taking that step, faithful step, doing something a little different in your region of the world where you're called, and to find out that God is working in the lives of others in unique places of the world doing similar things. So that's an affirmation that He's at work in all of you. And I just thank you all for your commitment to serving, especially in the field of Christian camping. I think if you weren't able to do that, you would still be serving somewhere, somehow. That's the heart that God put into you, to follow Him and His mission in this world. And that's why it's so inspiring for me, and I believe for everybody on this call, to know each other. And you said something key in there, Nathan. There's a friendship, and deep-spirited friendship is what Christian community looks like. And we're there for each other, and we encourage each other, and we spur each other on, and we join God in the work that He's doing. That's the beauty of what we're about. So I'm going to ask Vicki if she'll close us out in prayer, and this recording will be available. You can return back to it or send it on to others. And Nate, I think people can go through Vicki if they wanted to follow up with getting some resources from you or connecting with you.
Also, campduffel.com is our website, and Camp Duffel on Instagram. You can reach out and text me via that. That's just an easy way. Just Camp Duffel on Instagram, and follow us, and then you can message me, and it'll either be myself or Lucrecia responding. She usually leaves the English ones to me, and she responds to the ones in Spanish. So
sounds great. All right, Vicki.
So if you write in English, you'll most likely get me.
Thanks so much for that, Nate. That was incredibly inspiring. Appreciate that. Let's just pray. Father, I do just thank you for the time that we've been able to spend together, just learning about this model for camping that is accessible to so many more people than camp would be accessible to otherwise. And Lord, what a great privilege to be able to take camp to the people. Father, I pray that that this time will have inspired each person to think differently about how camp can be and what it can look like. Lord, it's a vast opportunity, and I just pray that you will just place that on our hearts to move forward. And Father, I pray that you'll bless the work of Camp Duffel. I pray that you'll be with Nate and the team who lead that, and just pray, Lord, that it will continue to reach more and more people with the gospel, Lord, that more and more people will come to know and love you. I just pray now as each of us, all of us go our own way, Lord, I pray that you'll just be with us, whether we're at the start of the day, the middle, or at the end, Lord, that you'll just bless each and every one. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Man, great. Good to see you all. Take care.
Thanks.